Thank you so much. My wife Candy and I are just absolutely delighted to be here with you. And I know that we're running a little bit late, and I will tell you that I have spoken in lots of different venues, including some Baptist churches. And you know how they start about 9:30 Sunday morning and end on Tuesday. But we're going to do a little bit better, and we're going to try to make up a little bit of time here. But, you know, I actually have some very serious things to talk about here tonight, because our country is in a lot of trouble. It's really in critical condition at this stage, and we really can't afford. I can't hear. Is that better? All right. Our country is in critical condition right now, and if we don't do something about it in the relatively near future, it's going to be over. I want you to think about the fact that if we get another progressive president in place, and they get a chance to appoint 3 more Supreme Court justices, that's the end of the United States as we know it. So this is the most serious situation we've had in a very long time. What's going to have to happen is that Republicans, conservatives, people of faith, and people with common sense have to get together. They have to get together. Now, some people are not going to like what I'm about to say. But after the primaries are over, if your candidate didn't win, don't take your marbles and go home. You still need to vote for whoever won. Okay? They may not agree with you on everything, but it is much better to work with somebody who agrees with you 90% of the time than somebody who disagrees with you 100% of the time, which is what happens when you take your marbles and go home. And we just have to understand the whole concept of give and take. You know, some people hate the word compromise. I don't like the word compromise when it applies to principles, but it's okay when it applies to tactics. And I'll give you a perfect example from the Bible. The story of Esther. You know, she hid the fact that she was a Jew. I'm sure some people were quite offended by that. She's ashamed of her heritage. She doesn't want anything to do with us. But she had a larger plan in mind. And when she was able to marry the king, she was able to save her people. This is the way we're going to have to think. All of us together, we have to look at the big picture. We are trying to save the nation right now. So we cannot have this attitude that if they don't agree with me on this particular issue, I'm out of here. That's craziness. That's exactly what the secular progressives want us to do. They revel whenever they hear a conservative say, nope, he's a rhino, he's a whatever, I'm not dealing with him, I'm going home. They rejoice when they hear that. You will be able, with the right kind of leadership, to herd the rhinos, and they will move in the right direction. Okay? We also need to readopt the Reagan rule. Never speak ill of another Republican. Okay? Don't do that. We don't need to be tearing each other down. There'll be plenty of time when the other side will be doing everything they can. They will be making things up. They will be telling lies. We don't have to give them ammunition. Believe me, they will find enough on their own. We don't have to do that. And we need to learn how to build each other up, not tear each other down. And, you know, I myself have had an argument with some people on the conservative side because of my stand on the Second Amendment. You know, I feel, first of all, that the Second Amendment is vitally important, and I would never compromise the Second Amendment in any way. It was put there for a very specific reason, so that the people could act in support of the military in case of an invasion, but more importantly, so the people could protect themselves from an overly aggressive government if that ever happened. So we absolutely cannot compromise that, because all we have to do is look back through history and see what happened when various dictators rose to power. One of the first things that they always did was confiscate the weapons. So we don't ever want to allow that situation to occur. We don't even necessarily want them to know who has weapons. You have a right to have weapons. What I have said, which has caused some people concern, is that there are areas of our society where there is an inordinate amount of gun violence, and sometimes very heavy weaponry is utilized. What we need to be able to do is sit down and have a discussion about, is there a way to ameliorate that situation, and also, is there a way to keep weapons out of the hands of people who are mentally ill without compromising any provision of the Second Amendment? That's what I've said. We need to be able to do that. And we never will resolve problems if we can't talk. If we get into corners and we say, absolutely cannot talk about that. You see, that's what the left does. And that is called intolerance. And that is not who we are. When I talk about we, I'm talking about people with common sense, who have the ability to use their brains to actually solve problems. That's what we want to do. As far as immigration is concerned, you know, obviously, all of us are immigrants at some level. However, we do have rules that govern how immigration is done to this nation, and we need to follow those rules. And as far as the border is concerned, we have the ability to secure the border. We just don't have the will to secure the border. You know, we have what we need to do that. We have 10,000 drones. You know, we have all kinds of technological things. And all we have to do is consult some of the people who have developed all kinds of ways of keeping people out of their territory. And we can take the best of those things and we can multiply them. But we can absolutely do that. There's no question about it. But the other part of it is we have to reduce the incentive for people to want to come here. That's how you fix the problem. I guarantee you that if you remove all the goodies, people will find a way to get out of here just like they found a way to get in here. And one of the most important parts of that are the employers. And as far as I'm concerned, the second offense, if you hire someone who is not here legally, should be a criminal offense and should be treated as such. Absolutely. I guarantee you it would stop. Now, it is true that, you know, some of the people who work the fields, who do some of the jobs that Americans sometimes don't want to do, are necessary to some parts of our economy. It's true. But we need to have rules in place that say only if American citizens will not take this job will we make it available to a guest worker who is officially, legally here, who is paying taxes and is registered. If we do it that way, it will make a tremendous difference. And to be able to become a registered immigrant worker, what you have to do is apply from outside the country. That means if you're here illegally and maybe you have an employer, you need to talk to that employer and get them to verify that they want to bring you back. There'll be a process put in place where they can request to have you come back. They've already met the requirements that there's no American citizen who will take that job. But you have to do that from outside the country, because there's no way that we can put people in line to become American citizens or to enjoy the benefits of America who have broken the law and put them in front of people who have not broken the law. That doesn't make any sense. And then there's the issue of health care and health care reform. Now, this, narrative that some of the left have put forward, they say Carson doesn't want poor people to have health care. Nothing could be further from the truth. I just find them rather amusing. I remember, a few weeks ago, I said that, the VA scandal was a gift from God because it shined light on the fact of what happens when you put all these bureaucrats between patients and healthcare providers. And so what does some of the left-wing media do? They say, Carson said God wants veterans to die. I mean, they're so ridiculous. It's almost funny. But I absolutely think that we have the capacity and we're compassionate enough to provide health care for all of our citizens. But we need to do it in the right way. We need to do it in a way where the care is between the patient and the physician, and we get rid of all the people in the middle. That's the problem with the VA system. Now, there are a number of ways and components to the solution here, but one of the real keys is health savings accounts. I love health savings accounts, and you get one the moment you're born, and it stays with you until the moment that you die. And money is placed in it every year, and it accumulates, and you don't lose it if you don't use it. And for young people, of course, they are not going to be having great uses of that until usually well into adulthood, so quite a lot of money will have accumulated by that time. You can fund it from a variety of different ways. There's a host of ways. And saveourhealthcare.org, you go there and you can see some of the different ways that it can be funded. But I also would advocate that people have the ability to shift money in their health savings account. So let's say the dad is $500 short. The money can come from his wife's HSA or his daughter or his grandfather or anybody within the family. That provides tremendous flexibility, makes every family virtually their own health insurance company with no middleman in the middle. Takes care of a lot of problems. Also, keep in mind that all of your routine health care is coming out of your HSA. You sprain your ankle, you think you need an x-ray? That's coming out of your HSA. You need a physical exam for a new job? That's coming out of your HSA. You need birth control pills? That's coming out of your HSA. No Hobby Lobby, okay? You don't even have to worry about it. So, but since everything is coming out of your HSA, 80+% of anything that you encounter, there's very little to impinge upon your major medical insurance. So the cost of that is going to go down dramatically. And that major medical insurance, you can buy from any place in the United States. Now what that will do is it will make the consumer the person who's in charge. And what that will do is it will bring the whole healthcare system into the free market economic model, and that's what controls quality, and that's what controls price. That's how you do it. But unfortunately, we have a lot of components to this sickness in the United States. It's not just a healthcare problem. We have a fiscal problem. We now have a $17.5 trillion going on $18 trillion national debt. That is a crime against all of those who follow us in the future. And let me tell you how much money that is. If you try to pay back $18 trillion at a rate of $10 million a day, $10 million, that's a lot of money. $10 million a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, it would take you 5,000 years. That's how much money we are talking about. That is absurd. How do we ever allow something like that to happen? But why is it there? Because we can print money. We are the reserve currency of the world, a status that generally goes with the number one economic power in the world, which we have been since the 1870s. That position is under threat now, of course. China's moving a little bit too fast. We're moving a little bit too slow. We're not moving at all, really, at this stage of the game. And so what if we lose that designation at some point? May not be the China. It may be a basket currency where they take several different currencies and make up a reserve currency. There's much talk about that already. And we no longer have the ability to print money. What happens? Virtually overnight, we become a third world nation. Everything that everybody's worked for, Occupy Wall Street will be a walk in the park compared to what you will see going on at that point. And that's why it is absolutely critical that we mobilize right now with our spheres of influence, all the people that we know, our extended family, our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, our fellow church members, everybody in your sphere of influence. You need to be talking about this problem. And you need to be informing yourself of who your representatives are. I don't care whether they're Democrats or Republicans. What you need to find out is, are they continuing to vote to raise our debt ceiling? And if they are, throw them out of office. That's what we need to do. We simply can't afford to go any further. And we need to shrink the government. It's too big. In 2010, if you take the income of everybody who made $69,000 and above, it comes out to $5.1 trillion. That's a lot of money. The federal budget that year was $3.5 trillion. 60% of everything the middle class and above makes for the federal budget. I mean, that is ridiculous. And then you have people like Nancy Pelosi saying, you can't cut one penny without hurting people. Are you kidding me? I mean, that is absolutely absurd. What we really need to do is we need to shrink the government, and I have a very good way to do that. Thousands of government employees retire each year. Don't replace them. And you can shift people from one department to another if you want to. And you do that for about 4 years, and the government will be down to a lean, mean size. They will only have enough personnel to do what they're supposed to do, and they'll keep their big noses out of everybody's business. Now, I would add one agency, however, to the government. It would be a covert agency, and they would go around and they would monitor government workers and government services. And people who were irresponsible, lazy, and unresponsive would find themselves with a no job. That's the way it ought to be done. I do have good news, however. You know, Candy and I are traveling around the nation all the time, 4 or 5 states a week, large enthusiastic crowds of people who are just completely fed up with what's going on in our nation. Our nation is waking up very, very rapidly. And I predict in November there's going to be a sea change. The liberals are going to be scratching their head. They will not be able to figure out what happened. But you see, that has to be only the beginning. We cannot be satisfied with that. We need to go on, and we need to win in 2016. And when I say we, I'm talking about people with common sense. Okay? I don't care what party they belong to, because the vast majority of people in this country actually do have common sense. What has happened is that they've been beaten into submission by the secular progressives, the liberal media. You look at what's going on in our universities, which are supposed to be the bastions of intellectual thought, and what they're teaching the students is if somebody doesn't agree with you, you don't want to hear them, you don't want anybody else to hear them. If they have a business, you want to shut it down. If they have a reputation, you want to destroy it. That is fascism. That's what's going on in our nation right now. When we get the majority in the Senate, we really need to start talking about how do we deal with the poor people in our country, with the indigent. We are compassionate people, and we do take care of a lot of individuals. I was talking to a friend of mine the day before yesterday, and he had just bought a $500,000 Ferrari. So he has a lot of money, okay? But he was telling me how he had just hired 500 people, and next year he's going to hire 1,500, and the year after that, 5,000. Just because people are rich, it doesn't make them into bad people. They provide a lot of jobs for other people. There's nothing wrong with that. But what is truly non-compassionate is looking at poor people and saying, you poor little thing. You can't do anything for yourself, so I'm going to give you free health care and food stamps and a housing subsidy and everything that you possibly need because you can't do it for themselves. And those bad rich people, they are the ones who are causing your problem. And everybody knows that that's not true. That is the worst thing you can do because that makes people dependent. That is cutting their legs out from underneath them. That is not what we need. We need everybody in this country. We need to develop all the talent that we have in this country if we are to survive. You know, India has more than 1 billion people. China has more than 1 billion people. We only have 300 million people. We need to cultivate every single one of them. And that's what's going to make America strong. And we need to utilize some of the programs like microfinance, some of the things that Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Prize, advocated, which lifted millions of people out of poverty in Pakistan and India. Those same kind of principles can apply here. We want to give people a mechanism for climbing out of that 47% and making it to the top in America. That's what we have to do. We need to think about the fact that God has blessed this country with abundant natural resources. Our EPA shouldn't be used to stifle the development of those, but rather to work with universities and industry to develop those things. Those high energy costs are hurting the poor people in this nation. Think about people who have to drive for a living and how that impacts upon them. And, you know, by not putting in the Keystone Pipeline, I'll tell you, the rich investors can take their money and put it somewhere else. But what about all of those plumbers and electricians and diggers and all those people who would have jobs. They don't have the ability to do that. They're the ones who's being hurt. I hope the people of America realize that the policies of this administration are hurting them. This is what's happening. They frame it in such a way that they try to make it seem like it's the fault of somebody else. And I hope that those people who are really being hurt are starting to wake up. And I will tell you something that's very encouraging. When I'm out in the public and I'm walking around, a lot of people who are the workers of this society, the hard workers, the low-income people, come up to me and they say, "Doctor, you got to run. You got to save us." There are a lot of them who do that. And I don't think they're stupid at all. I think the administration thinks they're stupid, and they think that they can be manipulated so easily just by saying a few things, and there may be been a time when people weren't paying attention, but I believe they're starting to wake up now. And as far as the business segment, you know, did you hear the Secretary of the Treasury the other day? I thought that was hilarious when he said, "Oh, well, maybe we got the highest corporate tax rate in the world, but, you know, companies should do their patriotic duty and pay those taxes." Are you kidding me? I mean, why do people go into business? They go into business to make money, not to support the government. And a smart government knows that. And, you know, you're talking about the most dynamic, powerful economic engine the world has ever known. But we have the heavy foot of government regulation on the neck of business and industry. We have absurd taxation policies. And these are things that can be easily reversed, but we have to get the requisite number of people in both houses of Congress, and we got to get the White House, and we can turn this thing around in virtually no time at all. It's not going to be a hard thing to do. And, you know, in terms of foreign policy, we do not need to stick our nose in everybody's business, but we do need to lead. We are the pinnacle nation of the world. There's a responsibility that comes with that, you know. And right now, the world is like a third-grade class with no teacher in it. And it's going like crazy, okay? So, you know, we have some incredibly bright people in this country. I've talked to a lot of them who know an awful lot about foreign policy. And you have to understand, you know, the whole history of the Middle East. You know, if we'd known the history of the Middle East back in 2009, when the Iranian people were in the uprising against their government, guess what? We would have helped them. And that would have turned the whole scene. We wouldn't be dealing with all this stuff right now. But when you don't know what's going on, what are you going to do except react? And that's what we're doing. We sit back and we react. We should have plans in place for virtually every scenario. You know, not only in the Middle East, but, you know, in Russia, that whole area. You know, why are we sitting around waiting for Putin to react? You know, we have the ability with all of our natural resources to make Europe dependent on us for oil. They don't need to be dependent on the Soviet Union. And we need right now to be formulating treaties with all the former components of the Soviet Union, which will make it much more difficult for Putin to get in there. We need to put him back in his box because we don't need another Cold War with the Soviet Union. But we have to think about that now. And when we do get back in power, and we are going to, because I can tell you something, there are enough God-fearing people in this nation, God is not going to turn his back on us. Will not do it. Okay? But when we do get back in power, and again, when I say we, I'm talking about people with common sense. We have to take the Constitution and put it on the top shelf once again in this nation. And then We have to govern for all the people, and we will not pick and choose which laws we want to enforce, and we cannot have favorite groups because there's only one special interest group that we should be interested in, and that is the people of the United States of America. And every child learns the Pledge of Allegiance when they go to school, okay? And it's wonderful because it says we're one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. But think about what's going on right now. We're no longer one nation. We're trying to kick God to the curb. We're divided in every way possible. They drive a wedge into everything to create a war on women, racial wars, income wars, gender wars, religious wars. So it's not indivisible. Liberty and justice for all when we pick and choose who winners are. We have just about turned that thing completely around. But we have the ability because the power lies with we, the people. It just means that we have to exercise that power. We have to become responsible voters. We have to be clever. We have to work together. We cannot allow ourselves to be divided. They will do everything in their power to divide us up and to make us think that, the Tea Party is here and the rhinos are here. And forget about it, because we're going to have a Tea Party rhino get-together. And we are going to take back the country. And this is what we're going to have to do. We have to do it. We can do it. We can work together, because it doesn't matter which end of the right-sided spectrum you're on. We have a lot more things in common than we have apart. And we need to use that collective strength to take back America. Thank you.
Ben Carson. You talk about health care. You talk about America's political health. Ben Carson. I think they love you in Denver, Dr. Carson. We want to make a gift to you and Candy to take home. Our artist in residence of the Western Conservative Summit, a very gifted caricature and portrait artist, envisioned Ben Carson in surgical garb doing life-saving procedure for our beloved country. How about this?
I love it.
There's America on the operating table. We're in good hands. We're in gifted hands.
Thank you.
There you are. Thanks a lot.